Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you've felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast. This one is a bonus episode. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have the most special guest that I've ever had on the podcast, my grandfather, Pop. How are you?
I'm fine.
This is your first podcast ever, and you are 80 years old, and you are a wealth of wisdom, and I'm excited to tap into it.
Just turned 80, Joseph.
You did just turn 80. How were you surprised when we surprised you with your party?
Well, I go with the motto: never expect nothing, and you'll never be disappointed. And so, therefore, when they told me we were going to meet for dinner, I thought we would be just a few of us, but there was a group of people there.
Yeah, that was a nice time, and it was good to spend it with family and to meet some of your friends again.
Great.
Yeah. So, Pop, if you had to introduce yourself to somebody listening to this podcast who's never met you, they don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Joseph's grandfather, number one. Number two, I'm worked for over 30 years in the New York City Board of Education. And I served in many particular areas, first as a teacher, then as a coordinator, and then as an assistant principal. And finally, I retired as a principal.
Now, I learned from Mom just this past week, actually, that you retired when you were 55. Is that right?
That's correct.
And I said to Mom, what have you been doing all these years? I didn't know you've been retired for that long.
Well, I helped your mother raise three rugrats.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were indeed a handful.
Yes, I'm sure we were. I can only imagine. But when I was growing up, you always would call me, you had a nickname for me. You know what that is?
Yes, number one.
Yeah. Why was that?
Well, that's a good question. You would think we rehearsed this, because one of the things that I noticed about Project Endure is there's a motto of do hard things, and being number one was a hard thing, and because you were the standard bearer for the rest of the children in the family, and I wanted to make sure you understood that to a way in which you performed, but you already took that bull by the horns, and you were an outstanding student, and you also worked very hard at achieving academically. And I realized that from the get-go, and I was very, very pleased with that. One of the most important things is that I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you know the reason why such an emphasis was put on academics in this family?
I know that academics have been a big part of your life. Outside of that, I'm actually not sure.
Well, your great-grandparents, my parents, were first generation immigrants, and they came to this country because it was their parents came to this country because it was a land of opportunity, especially educationally and academically, because everyone was granted an education. It was a public education, but from K to 12, you all started out. You had the opportunity to start out as a student, and you made the most of what you put into it. You got out of it. And in the particular case of our family, your grandmother, my mother, was taken out of high school by her father because she had to be a seamstress. They wanted her to be a seamstress because it was the Depression, and it was a very, very tough time financially for families. Grandma came from a family of 10, 8 of which survived, and they had to work in order to put food on the table. Mm. So when my grandfather came up to school, to high school, he signed them out of school, and they were very distraught about not being able to graduate. At the time, they went to a high school in the Bronx. Was a public high school, Walden High School, and it had a very good reputation, and they were eager to learn. But they were pulled out to become seamstress, and they did what they called piecework, and they would sew dresses and get paid by the number of dresses they were able to sew. And this was before the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, where they would say to the workers, if you don't come in Sunday, don't come in Monday. And that was a 7-day-a-week job. But the money they brought home went into the kitty to buy food for the family of 8. And that was the way it worked. In Grandpa's case, his mother died when he was born in childbirth. And that wasn't unusual because there were no hospitals at the time. There weren't many of them, but there were things called midwives. And many parents never survived childbirth due to a variety of reasons. But in Grandpa's case, he had very little education, maybe as much as a grammar school education, because when he was born, he was born in the United States in Cherry Street under the Manhattan Bridge, and it was a ghetto, literally a ghetto, and he was raised by his godparents because then. When you were godparents, or you were intended to be godparents, you had this responsibility that you assumed when you became a godparent. Mm. And his father really wanted nothing to do with him as a child because he sort of blamed him for the passing of his wife. Mm. And that was uncommon also. But he went back to Italy. He lived back in Italy as a boy. And he came back to the United States, and he attended elementary school. But he had to work because it was the Depression also, mm-hmm. And he did things like, believe it or not, drove on a horse wagon that delivered milk, and also he used to make pennies lighting the gas lights on the street lights were gas powered, and he would use a wicker candle to go and light the gas lights at night so that you could see at night when you often see an electric street light in your own neighborhood, you wonder where that all started. Well, he used to light those candles, light those wicks, and that's how they powered the lights during the Depression, and so. He was smart enough to be able to take a civil service exam, and then worked for the New York City Transit Authority. He was a bus driver on a public bus driver. But again, we were taught as children that we had to make the best of our education, and we went to high school and college. And we earned degrees. We were the first families to do that. My younger brother, Michael, as you know, is Uncle Mike. he got as far as medical school, entrances to medical school, but he became a chiropractor, and that didn't stop him from learning, but he continued his practice and did what he could do. And again, he was 16 years younger than we are, Uncle Phil and I. So he was a my father was he played football for Monsignor Farrell, and he would hold the chains. My father would hold the chains, and he was a Boy Scout leader, and so forth and so on. And it gave him a little encouragement to stay young.
Mm.
But Uncle Mike received an education, and we all had degrees. Uncle Phil was a lawyer. I entered the education field, and Uncle Mike was a health provider, doctor. So we all did something that was very indicative of taking advantage of the opportunity. And so we encourage you guys, you, your brother and sister, are perfect examples of taking advantage of higher education and doing well in school. You particularly, because you were the first, and others would take, whether you know it or not, would look at you and say, "Well, this is my role model. This is my standard bearer, so to speak." And as a result, you had a very important role in their development. In that, you were taught to value education. You did, and you've made the most of it.
Thank you, Pop Pop. And just for anyone listening to this, the reason I want to have you on the podcast is because you have so much wisdom, and beyond that, I just want to have a conversation, and I want to keep it. And so for anybody listening to this, we're going to jump all over the place. We might have some long-winded answers. That's classic Pop Pop. And I'm excited to dive in. And, on that note of education, Pop Pop, does it bother you, or did it bother you that I went down this path of high school, college, graduate school, and then took a pivot where I left that path and in a way kind of didn't use the education in the specific way that I got it to do what I'm doing now?
You're using your education more than you know.
Tell me more.
You understand that the way you deal with people, the way you deal with the concerns, the way. What I'm most impressed about is that you've taken another quote of mine. Talk about wisdom. I was taught early on: preach always, speak if you must. Because you see, I was always impressed by people who didn't speak or talk a good game, but did a good game. And I see you as a person who has followers because of what you do, not because of what you say. What you say is important because it provides a basis or a guideline, but what you do is more important than what you say, because you're physically. I used to go to doctors who used to smoke and were overweight and tell me I had to take care of myself. I would laugh, only because I say, well, you have to practice what you preach, and that's an important part of it all. I didn't mean to be too long-winded, but I think you needed to know that. But that's an important part of life, in that if you preach always, speak if you must. It's what you do is what you then more than important than what you say, because it's easy to talk, but it's not easy to do.
I don't remember where I heard this quote, but it goes along the lines of, if your actions don't match your words, then you have nothing to say. And I agree. I agree with everything that you said. And I get that in a lot of ways from watching mom and dad and you and the other people that I grew up surrounded by doing the same. And I would love to use this as an opportunity to rewind and go back to when you were my age, Pop Pop. And I would love to hear about what life was like 50 years ago when you were 30. And then maybe we can use that as a jumping point to go forward from there.
I have a hard time remembering what I had for breakfast. Forget about what I did 30 years ago or 50 years ago.
So 30, when you were 30, that year would have been what? We would have been in, let's do some quick math.
I was a teacher in a special program. It was a very difficult job to get a job as a teacher. Very, very difficult. Uh, but there were some jobs that people didn't want, and when I was given the opportunity to work in a special program, I jumped on it, and I found it easy because of the way I was raised. Um, I've oftentimes told you and Michaela that anybody can teach people who want to learn. But the most difficult part of it is to teach people who don't want to learn and have set up their personality so that they are anti-education, if you will. But I spent a lot of time with youngsters, unperforming, underachieving youngsters, explaining to them how other kids didn't care about their progress, and all you were doing was make it easy for them because there was less competition in the long run, and so that they needed to learn and to be part of the system that they frowned upon, take advantage of the fact that they could learn as well as other kids and make something out of themselves to become productive members of society. That's what I always wanted for myself and for you guys. Same way.
So when you started that part of your career and you were 30, what did life look like outside of work?
Well, my kids had this bad habit. They like to eat. And I had to work a lot of procession jobs in the Board of Ed. I worked the summertime. I worked after school center programs and vacation day camp. I had a license. At the time, you had to be licensed in if you will, physical education or teacher of phys ed, and is a separate licensing process that you can apply for jobs for in New York City. I had a, a license in secondary education and primary education, and secondary education needed a subject area, and I had history and social studies, math and science also. It gave me a lot of hooks to put my hat, hang my hat on, and I got involved in this special program because there was a particular person who said to me, "Look, I could give you a job. I could make you work because no one wants to work in this field. These are tough kids. They weren't tough kids. They were difficult kids. But once you reach them, there was fine because again, anybody could teach kids who wanted to learn." He told me that. It's this supervisor, and I lived by that quote for a long time because it helped me distinguish myself among my colleagues. And yes, a lot of people work 9 to 5, 9 to 3 at a particular job as a teacher, but they went home. They punched that clock at 3 o'clock. I didn't think my day was over then, and I worked. And when I worked in procession jobs, working to raise money to keep your family ahead, there were opportunities for me to be physical with the kids and play games and make sure they understood that I was a person too. And that when you would see a teacher in the mall and say, "Oh, that's my teacher." Well, that's like you're a different person, but you're not. You're the same as those kids, and you grew up the same way, and you had to understand. They had to understand that you were there to help them, and you could lead them to water, but you couldn't force them to drink. But they also had a chance to learn, and everyone is given the same set of textbooks in the beginning of September, and they did what they wanted to do with them. They read them, or they worked with them, or they studied them, regardless of the content, and you may take objection to that, but the older you got, the more you were able to think. As you study a curriculum, you find out that when you learn, you learn facts and information, but you take that and you put it to good use in that you are able to allow people then to think for themselves, to be critical thinkers, and you can read whatever you want to read, but you have to understand that. It wasn't until I got to graduate school that I understood that I took a course in a post-bachelor's degree. It was a 6-year certificate program where you earn your master's degree and you got a certain amount of credits for pay increments. And there was a teacher who said to us that if you read a book, you must know something about the author who wrote it, because he would read passages. For example, the course was post-Civil War in America. Mm. And I thought that would be interesting. And he wrote his thesis in the Library of Congress, which is a huge public library. And you get primary sources all the time. And he used primary sources to his advantage. And he read a quote that I was astounded by, because he wrote it. It was a person talking about from a pro-slavery point of view. And you know who it was who wrote it? It was Abraham Lincoln. And he wrote it on a campaign trail when he was running for president. And you're shocked to know that this is what President Lincoln thought about. Well, he was campaigning in the South, so he had to speak about issues that were relevant to the Southern Americans, and then he became a champion of racial equality and the abolition of slavery. And you found it hard to believe, but you have to read books based on who wrote those books and what their perspective is, and if you will, what their point of view is, because that's what they're trying to sell you. And so that whenever you read a book, you should understand that and apply it to the people you're writing to, your audience, if you will. And that's a key factor in the development of thinking, critical thinking anyway. Understanding who is speaking when you're listening to a public address or speak or issues. That's important to understand that and be critical of those people who are writing for you, to read and understand where they're coming from when you read it, because that makes the decision a lot easier. It makes you understand where it's what their point of view is. Very important part of learning.
Yeah,
that becomes when you become more sophisticated as a learner.
Sure. Yeah, the context matters. And
sure.
To go back to something you said about reaching those children who are maybe a bit more difficult, or helping children learn who didn't want to learn, would you agree that the human connection side of what you did was an important factor in getting to reach those kids?
Without a doubt, because then they realized that you were making sense to them. Common sense is a very important thing. Your parents raised you. You were born. You didn't come with a book of instructions. They had to use a lot of common sense in raising you, and they had to use family traditions and your culture and what have you. And that's exactly the way I thought, based on my experiences in life. And those kids understood that there were people who put them down all the time and said derogatory things about them. But I said, my point was that you bring that on yourself. You have to raise yourself above that. You raise your intellect above that, and show that you're capable of thinking also, and capable of contributing. The interesting things about it is that a lot of these kids were very good at mechanical issues and could work with their hands. And we had shop classes for that, and we had home economics classes for the women. And you'd be surprised how many of them excelled in those areas that had nothing to do with book learning. Mm. As you remember going to school, you were involved in classrooms where children always wanted to learn, always had questions, and tried to impress the teachers with that information and their hard work, which was fine, which is good if it was done for the right reason. But a lot of these kids didn't see value in that, and they wanted school was, if you will, miseducated for them, and you didn't want them to turn off to the learning part of the experience. And learning makes you a better person, and I tried to make them understand that, and that's why I had such an emotional relationship with the people I worked with.
So speaking of learning, one of the things that I'd love for us to talk about is some of the life lessons that you've accumulated throughout the 80 years you've been here so far. And to kick it off, I have a couple things that you've said to me over the years that I want to share and then get your take on. So this is the least serious of them. But when I was engaged to Michaela, we were cleaning up after we had dinner at mom and dad's house. And I was washing dishes, and you tapped me on the shoulder and you said, you have to do it wrong and they'll never ask you to do it again, in reference to marriage. And I know that was, at least half a joke. I'm not sure, but is there a deeper lesson there, or was that all a joke?
No, that if you make mistakes, Nanny is great at doing things for me. But she'll say, well, you don't want to. I love to cook. But she said, I make a mess. So guess what? I continue to make a mess, so I get served. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's almost, in Italian, it was called farfisa cantende, stupid on purpose. Yeah, so you became a little critical. People are critical of you, but if you mess it up, they won't ask you to do it again. So, yeah, it's self-serving without a doubt.
Yeah,
and it's mostly humor. But you try to be helpful. You try to do as much as you can. In my case, I'm very fortunate because I had a wife who cared for me and continues to care for me. And of course, at this age, you get a little slow and you slow down a bit, and you're not capable of doing all the things you used to do. And she suffers because of
that. How many years have you guys been married?
56.
Yeah. When I reached out last year, I believe, for your 55th wedding anniversary, you said something to the effect of, talk about doing hard things. I've been married to your grandmother for 55 years. And I know there's humor in that as well. But on the note of marriage, what has been the hardest part of being married for 56 years?
Well, it's important that you understand that the vows of marriage made sense to me then, and have lived within my heart and soul for many years. Being faithful to one woman is a very difficult thing, especially in the profession that I was with, because I dealt with teachers and parents and kids all the time. But you understand the values that the sacrifices and the values that a person has and that lives with you all those years, and you need to support that person because that person supports you.
That's beautiful.
It's the truth.
Yeah, it is the truth. So, okay, we'll move on to the next one. You said even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. Tell me more about what that means.
Well, I used to tell that to your father when he played golf, um, because he would every now and then get a good shot, and same with me. And the swing would work out, and the ball would go in the right direction, and what have you. So even a blind squirrel uh, gets an acorn every now and then, comes across an acorn. So you have to be patient in life and hope that things work your way every now and then. There are some bad times you go through, obviously, and the good times come, and sometimes you have nothing to do with it. It just happens. Uh, Thus, the blind squirrel finding the acorn. They sort of stumble upon it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to remember that he's in the woods, and he's in the right place to find them and to find the good things that happen to you.
Mm.
So even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then.
Yeah, you don't stumble across opportunities while standing still.
No, without a doubt.
So the next one, and then we'll get into your lessons. I believe you said if you want to make an omelet, sometimes you have to crack some eggs. What does that mean?
Well, just what it says. In order to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. So if you're going to be creative and you're going to work with certain people, certain type of people, you might have to be iconoclastic. In other words, you have to break some rules to accomplish the ends. Do the ends justify the means? I'm not quite sure. But if you don't take a chance every now and then, you're never going to know. And you have to deserve the apple cart, if you will, to make it happen. Well, then, albeit as long as that's what you feel it takes to do that certain thing. So I was never afraid to be a creative, because I always thought the results would make the difference in people's lives.
So what are some of the other life lessons that you've stumbled across in these 80 years?
Not to do podcasts.
Well, you've avoided that for a while, but here we are.
That's true. But when you get to the end of your life, you realize that it's not a bad idea to put down in writing or in the media, social media or whatever, how you feel and what you think. It's important, and it's a good part of it all. Because I've known many good people who have gone to their rest and have never had a chance to say what was on their mind, and as a result, they had to hope that people watched the way they lived and saw what they did in life, and had people who followed them. I think I'm fortunate that way, because I think there are many people who understand my philosophy about preach always and speak if you must. The less you speak, the better off you are. The more you do, the better off you are.
Before I let you share some of the wisdom, I have a quote from Ernest Hemingway, who said, "Every man has two deaths, one when he is buried in the ground, and the other the last time someone says his name." And, I think we all will have the opportunity to live on, beyond our time here on earth. And one of the ways, like you mentioned, is to share things, to write things, to leave things behind. And the other is to just live a life where you impact people, and those people go on to impact people. And that's a legacy that will never stop. And I think it's special to think about leaving the world better than we found it. And I know you've done that. And I would love for you to share some of that here on the podcast so we can listen back to it.
Well, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. You're a prime example of someone who has learned from things I've said and done. and your family also is an important part of it. Again, I don't want to be too verbose, but when you live a life, um, you might say to me, well, you retired at 55, you're 80 now. What have you done? I've tried to continue and use some of my experience to help others. In that, I'm a board member of. I volunteer for United Activities Unlimited and Community Resources. Now, the Community Resources has to do with people with disabilities and finding homes for people who feel that they can live in the community and live as normal a life as they can. And United Activities Unlimited provides inner city kids with opportunities to learn and to successfully use their time in sports and whatever. And there's some counseling and drug abuse and what have you that go on with this, along with this, and then parenting also. And I think that's an important part of it. I've selected these two agencies. They're both non-for-profit agencies, but I like working with them because they're filled with people who dedicate their lives to helping others, and I think that should be recognized. No matter what you do, there's always someone out there who has it worse than you do. Mm-hmm. And if you can help and be a part of their success, that's even better. You've done the same thing. You've raised money for particular causes. You've tried to do that, and I'm so proud of you. I am happy that you do that, and you see that as a necessary opportunity to use your own skills to appreciate and bring along other people, bring it to their attention. As far as my own life is concerned, that's a great question. But I like to try to live as simple a life as I possibly can. Preach always, and speak if you must.
What's been the proudest moment of your life so far?
Well, I look and see how my children and grandchildren have done, and I feel very proud of that. When we got together the other day, and I said, everybody has grandchildren. And I also said that mine are very special. And they truly are, because all of you are involved in successful careers, and everyone appreciates education. And I think that you will have an impact on your society as you get along. Those who speak and say they're going to do things usually don't. and you just roll up your sleeves and you do what you can, and that's an important part of your life. And that makes me very proud to know that there are children and grandchildren out there who do that, and that are directly related to my own life. Yeah. As small as infinitesimal as it is, when it comes to the larger part of society, every person who you come in contact with, you have an effect on, and somehow or another down the line, it may be at an unfortunate time. Uncle Phil passed away recently, and I couldn't believe how many people were involved in that funeral. Of course, John, Philip, and Michael, and Brian. Brian being a fireman, almost every fireman on Staten Island was there, and every judge. I recall the priest who celebrated the mass. There was a priest, a bishop, and a Monsignor at the service. And when Father Jerome said the Pope was busy, I told him, when I came to him, I said to him, I wish you wouldn't have said that, because now I'm going to have to call the Vatican to see what his schedule was that day and why he didn't show up. but Uncle Phil would have expected that. But it's amazing to see how many people he touched the lives of so many people that through his career, both professionally and personally, and that I felt very very good about. I certainly don't expect. I won't be there, but I might be in spirit. But I don't know how many people will be at my wake. But I hope those who come care, and that's all that counts.
Yeah. Well, you know, I I'm proud to have you as my grandfather, and I know that you're so proud of everyone in our family. And um, you know, I'm sure being at 80 years old, there are certain things that feel important now that maybe didn't, 50 years ago, and vice versa. What's one thing that you used to think was important in life, maybe when you were 30, that you now know is not that important?
Well, that's a good question. Um, I think you become you learn to not value physical things much anymore, money and wealth, and there was always a quote that I read when I volunteered for the Boy Scouts of America in an executive capacity. Um, won't matter the kind of car you drove, the kind of house you own, the kind of vacation you took, but the difference you made in the life of a child.
Hmm.
Very important.
Yeah.
Very important. You'll find that these material things are always good to attain, to strive for, and obtain, especially when you have a family and you want them to enjoy what they do. But um, it makes a difference. One of the things I respect about your dad is more than anything else is that when he first met your mom, he'd be the first to help someone in need, uh, and that I found to be very a good part of it. When he asked for my daughter's hand in marriage, and I realized that he was a good person, which is very hard to find in this day and age.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I wanted you to understand. Um, and your question was good in that these are intangible things that you can't find out very easily, and you understand it's only through experience that you learn these things, and you learn these about other people. You don't learn much about another person unless there's a hardship and there's an issue that has to be dealt with. Usually, in an emergency, you find out that uh, I'll give you an example. I had in my career as a teacher, I very really had issues with where children would fall and we had a youngster who actually uh, died playing football,
Mm.
and I had a friend of mine who I didn't understand too much, but when it came to mouth resuscitation and being there for that youngster, at the end, he was dripping in sweat, and and that boy, he told me the boy died, and I said, "Oh boy," and he just was outstanding in an emergency,
Mm.
and that's where the cream comes to the top when you need somebody in a case of an emergency like that. Uh, it separates the men from the boys, if you will. And he did, and I respected that effort he made at that point in time.
Well, I think that brings up a good point, which is on the surface, we might not understand other people and we might not always agree with other people on a variety of things. But when it comes to this life and what it means to be human, I think we can respect and admire and appreciate people for stepping up to be there for other people, regardless of whether we agree with all the other things.
I would hope so. I would
Yeah.
hope so.
So looking back, Pop, what's the best risk you've ever taken?
It's funny. We go to bingo once a week, and I'm convinced I have the longest losing streak of anybody in the bingo hall. Or we go in this clubhouse room, and somebody asked me, "You're not upset about losing?" I said, "Well, I won the big race many years ago when I married my wife." It's the truth. It's the truth.
Yeah.
Because she won't agree with that, but she'll always tell me that I'm exaggerating or making a mountain out of a molehill. But it's the truth. I think choosing a partner is a very important part of the rest of your life, and deciding to have a family, taking that risk. Because as I said to you before, you don't come with a book of instructions.
Mm.
It's raising children that puts pressure on you, and you live vicariously through their achievements.
Mm.
And that's tough.
Mm. What was the hardest part of being a parent?
Well, the irony of it is, you have to teach children to make their own decisions. You watch the bird in the nest, and they learn to fly by instinct, but they learn to survive. And you have to be able to teach your children that personal decisions are very difficult.
Mm.
And but when you're proud of the decisions they make, and the work they do in life, and the way they raise their children, you feel very good about that. And I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah. Now, when you look back at life as a whole, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not choose for yourself?
A loaf of Italian bread. No, the hardest thing. Well, I remember being a young, just out of college, and I wondered whether or not I always wondered what I was going to be in life. And when I thought about education, first thing that the advisor in the school told me, "You'll never be rich being a teacher." And I said, "Well, it all depends what you think rich is."
Mm.
And I think that was a hard decision to find a career that I'd be happy in, because once you select a career, you have to work at it and develop it, and then it's not considered work anymore.
Mm. What was the hardest part of your teaching career?
Well, you needed to advance. The only way you could advance is through work and effort. And I was happy to see that people appreciated the effort that I made, and that I was rewarded with those advancements.
Mm.
Like I said, teacher, coordinator, assistant principal, and principal. I remember a quote somebody said to me once when they made me the school treasurer: "I don't like you, I trust you."
Huh.
Wow, that was deep, because trust is something that you give to people, very few people in your life, but that's key in knowing that you're a friend, but that's not the reason why that you're being considered for a promotion.
Mm.
It's because you're being trusted. Wow.
Yeah. Trust is hard to earn, and easy to lose in a lot of ways. And I think I would much rather be trusted than liked if I had the option between the two. And in an ideal world, I would be liked and trusted.
I think they go hand in hand, Joe.
Yeah.
Um, Developing trust in someone else comes through experience, and in that experience, once you gain somebody's trust, you know they like you.
Mm. So to shift gears a bit, in the past couple of years, you and Nanny moved from the house that you raised your family in Staten Island and lived in for a long time, multiple decades, to New Jersey to be closer to mom and dad, and
Over 50 years.
over 50 years. Wow. And I would imagine there were so many good memories in that house for you, and it must have not been easy to leave and to make this transition. What was all of that like, and what was challenging about that?
Well, your mom made the decision to put our name into this place we were at. And when they called me, they said, "Would you like to take a look at an apartment? Something's come available." And I said, "It has where?" So we came here to look at the apartment. As you know, it's a corner unit. There's no one living above us. There are a lot of windows involved, and the time was right. I was blowing leaves with holding a cane in one hand and a blower in the other hand. And the neighbor said to me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Yeah, that's true. I understand what you're saying." It was tough for me to take care of that property the way I used to and the way I enjoyed doing.
Mhm.
I took some pride in the condition of the house and what have you. And I couldn't do it anymore, Joe.
Mm.
And here I call maintenance for any issues I have. The only problem is the guy who comes doesn't speak English. So either I have to speak English or explain to him what ground fault interrupter switch is in Spanish. Otherwise, but he's been very good. Who's come to us, and they explain what our needs are, and he comes in and just does it.
Mm.
Again, I commend him on his work, not on the language that he speaks.
Mm. So I imagine a lot of people listening to this episode are, somewhere between 20 and 40 years old, maybe some younger, maybe some older. What pieces of advice or guidance, wisdom would you have for people who are, in those decades of life?
Pick your friends carefully. A few good friends are worth more than many who. I remember working in a continuing education office, and I'll leave you with this idea because it makes sense. This man who ran the program, I helped him run the program, and we collected a lot of money. A lot of it was self-sustaining. A lot of it was necessary. A lot of it was important. Teachers' procession activity became pensionable, and a lot of teachers then wanted to get work, even though they might not be capable and have the qualities for it. We tried to find as much of a staff as we could that was very concerned about what they did. But he said to me, quote unquote, "The day I announce my retirement, that phone's going to stop ringing." And it did, because he announced his retirement, and I didn't want to take it over, and it was offered to me, but I didn't want to take it over. But I remember what he said. A lot of people are out there because you can do something for them, but it's the people who want to work for you and do things for you, or do things for others that are not, if you will, motivated by some exterior motive that is intrinsic in the heart to do it. It's hard to find those people, but when you do, you find a few good friends that are it's important to you, and that's what I would suggest. You you uh, you understand, and keep your friends closer and your enemies closer. From The Godfather.
Now, Pop Up, this question's more for me than anyone else, but you talked about the importance of education and, knowing our history, but I would love to hear more about our roots, going back to your parents and your grandparents and what that means to you and why it's important to know where we came from.
Well, I don't know if you remember when my mother passed away. We had a church ceremony, and I was given the opportunity to eulogize her. But I spoke about how difficult it must have been for their parents as immigrants coming to this country. Oftentimes, they left circumstances, homes. You asked me how I felt moving from one state to another. But imagine moving to another country and putting everything you owned in one suitcase. I remember seeing my great grandmother's suitcase, a little cardboard box that she put everything in as she left the country and came to America, the land of opportunity. And remember that their children. That was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Mm. And there were very little machines at the time, albeit they gave you a shovel and a pick, and you dug tunnels and bridges and roads, and there was a lot of manual labor at that time. And they lived through World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression. And it was tough times. There were tough times. And these were special people. As far as I'm concerned, they were heroes. Mm. And they never asked for any recognition. They never wanted any recognition. They were just happy to know that their families they would live a better life than they did. Mm. And that's something to know. Most of the family that you're related to and I'm related to worked hard and earned what they received. And I think that's a very important lesson in life, that you find people who are hardworking and good people. Those are your friends. Mm-hmm. Those are the people you make friends from.
Yeah. I pulled up a Greek proverb and it says, "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in." And it sounds like all the sacrifice from, generations past continues to reap rewards for generations current and future. And
sure.
It's selfless,
That's the truth. When I met Nanny for the first time, and her father was in World War II, and he also came from Italy. At a time, he had a skill. He was a tailor, but he fought in the war, and they sent him to the Far East, and he was in India. He was in Burma, and the Burmese, the Burma Road, the very famous supply chain to the Japanese army, and he remembers traveling all over the world. But the guy had little artifacts that he picked up as he traveled to the world, and I would ask him about him, and he would be surprisingly quiet about what he went through and his experiences in life, and yet I know that he had them. I know it must have been tough going through the jungles of Burma and spending time in India and traveling around the world. Just remember, my father's stepfather. I remember when he passed. I try to explain to him that he came here in a boat that took almost a month to travel across the Atlantic in steerage, and there you Uncle Mark just came back from Europe, Paris, I think. Stella went for a high school 8th grade graduation. I went to Coney Island. She went to Paris. So it's funny that he had a hard time believing that they flew a plane from Europe to the United States. He never flew. He never crossed the Atlantic on a flight. But boy, that was an experience. He had a hard time believing that. But it happened. But he used to work. He lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment that had a bathroom down the hall. And my father used to go there all the time to try to help him and do things for him. And he said, "No, don't worry about it. I'll take care of myself." And he did. And it had to be terribly lonely. Had to be terribly must have been a difficult life. But he never complained about it. Just always asked me, "How you doing in school? How's school?" So, be somebody, he would say. And that's key.
Yeah.
You're right. That's a great quote too, Joe. Great quote.
Thanks, Pop. Now, a couple more questions and we'll wrap things up. But
Sure.
I ask everyone on the podcast, what does the word endurance mean to you? So when you hear the word endurance, what does that mean to you?
It means to continue on no matter what.
I like it.
Your life is difficult, and you can't let it affect the way you behave toward others. That's key. To endure, to last, to be strong. That's key.
So before I get to the last question, I did want to ask you. So everyone listening to this podcast, or most people who've come across anything that I create, know that I have Best disease and that my sight is affected. And that comes from your side of the family. And I know we've talked about it a little bit in the past, but how has that affected you? How has Best disease impacted your life, both from a you standpoint, but also just watching it, affect others in our family?
Well, old age has multiplied the circumstances to a point where I have a hard time seeing a lot of things. But I can make out the bare necessities. I use a magnifying glass and a magnifier, and I'm able to read the fine print on a lot of small items. I don't think the society has yet understood the visually challenged people in this world, and they make everything. The font that you can use on a computer now makes a big difference, and I like to print big so I can see things too. But it was a challenge. It wasn't something that I couldn't overcome, and I tried to use it to my advantage. I never spoke much about it. It was a genetic thing that happened many years ago, and socially and physically, I guess it could be explained by people who didn't have much property or value or wealth or whatever, tried to keep what they had inside their family. So there were a lot of marriages that were inside families, and that gene then became more dominant than it needed to be. If you study the history of Best disease, you find out in America it occurred a lot in those societies in the Midwest and Pennsylvania that many people intermarried.
I didn't know that.
It's interesting. Well, you look it up.
It is interesting.
That's the case, yeah. because people wanted to keep. If you had when were going to get married in the old country, it was a matter of having a dowry that you brought along with you, and if the dowry was significant, it was only because your family had some wealth to them in property and or value, and that's why they tried to keep it all in the family, if you will, right?
Well, I'll say this. I didn't always feel this way, but I do feel this way now. And I think I'll always feel this way, that I'm a better person because of Best disease in so many ways. Uh, it's a struggle that I live with and I can't get rid of, but it's a struggle that's made me stronger and more empathetic, and it's given me a greater perspective on life. And, I wouldn't have started any of this, and I wouldn't be the person I am, and we wouldn't be having a conversation like this if it weren't for my eyes.
Well, that's true. The important thing about it is you're sympathetic. It makes you more sympathetic to people who have other issues, and you understand that you did nothing to earn this, if you will, and it's something you inherited. And it's upsetting to your grandmother when you say, you can't see. It bothers her because I don't have the same issue. It's my fault that I have, but that's because of the relationship. That's the same lady who yelled at the nurse who had your ear bent the day you were born over in JFK.
Yeah.
So you understand that there's a different perspective of it all.
Sure.
But I'm proud of what you're able to accomplish because of it, and what your perspective on life is all about too.
Thank you, Pop Pop. Yeah, I'm not upset about it, and I don't want anyone else to be either. But with that being said, one of the questions that I like to wrap things up with is, if somebody's going through a hard time, or somebody's, in a challenging season right now, and they're just looking for some encouragement or some guidance, and you're the one who gets to speak it into their life right now, what would you say to someone who's going through a hard time and just needs a little bit of encouragement?
The British. I've been watching a lot of the Independence Day celebrations regarding the Second World War, and the more I see Winston Churchill, the more I admire the guy, because the German blitzkrieg destroyed London, and he kept a stiff upper lip. They used to say, the British used to say that all the time. Keep a stiff upper lip, and I always wondered what that meant, and I realized that giving a stiff upper lip means that you should persevere, endure, if you will. And I think that the encouragement that you can give someone else is that it's not impossible to solve these problems. Problems are not impossible. They're meant to be solved. That's why they're problems. And as a result, it's not beyond you. It's a challenge, of course, but it's not beyond you to solve issues that pertain to your life. You can always change. There's nothing that's irreversible, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
I would agree with that. And I'll throw in a Winston Churchill quote. He said, "It's not enough that we do our best. Sometimes we have to do what's required." And yeah, I mean, in addition to that, Pop, before we end this conversation, is there anything else that you'd like to share with me, with people listening, with anyone?
Actually, Nanny is making dinner soon. So my stomach is growling, so I'm hungry, and I think that I've said enough. I hope I haven't gone on too long.
No, this was perfect, Pop. And I really, really appreciate our conversation. And I really, really appreciate you. And thank you for this. And thank you for everything. And I'm excited for people to listen to this.
I'm happy that too. Don't hit the editor's floor with all my comments, but include the key points. Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you again, Pop Up.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.